All right, my secondary math 2 class, we are going to be starting a new unit today, and it feels like it's been forever since we've actually done some notes. So we are going to be working on now graphing quadratics. So I know you're all probably super sick of hearing the word quadratics, but we're not quite done with them yet. Okay, so now we are going to focus on graphing quadratics when they are in standard form. Okay, so let's go ahead and remind ourselves, what is standard form? What do they mean by that? Okay, so standard form of a quadratic is always written as a times x squared, or the variable squared, plus b times just the one variable, plus c, which is just a constant or has no variables attached. Okay, so this is standard form, A, B, C. Okay, whenever you think standard, think A, B, C. Okay, so let's go ahead and get into it. Notes are going to be kind of shorter today. Okay, so for number 1, it's asking us to write the formula. Okay, there's a formula for finding the vertex of a quadratic function in standard form. Okay, so in order to find the x part of the vertex, the formula is x equals negative b over 2 times a. Okay, super important. So your first step in order to graph these quadratic functions is going to be to find the x. Okay, so our first step is to find the x using that formula. Our second step is going to be to plug x into the function to find y. Because our vertex is a big important thing that we need, and we'll talk about what that actually is in a second. Our vertex is a coordinate point. Okay, we need x and y. We can't just have the x. Okay, first we find the x, second we use it to find y, and the third, then we'll have our vertex. Okay, so make sure you have those notes on that, your notes for number 1. Okay, so let's go ahead and practice this. So let's look at number 2. Okay, so we need to identify first before anything, we need to identify A, B, and C. Okay, so just looking at them, and we can even make this note on our paper over here. Okay, so A, my A coefficient is in front of the x squared, which is just a 1. Because remember, 1 being multiplied, we don't have to write it. B is going to be negative 2, and C is going to be positive 4. Okay, so now, knowing A, B, and C, we can find the x part of our vertex by plugging it in to our formula above. Okay, so instead of writing the b and the a, I'm going to do negative b on top over 2 times a. Okay, and now I can plug it in. Okay, so if this is negative b on top, my b is going to be negative 2. Over 2 times a, my a is 1. Okay, so let's go ahead and solve this. So on top I have a double negative here. What happens when I have a double negative? Turns into a positive. Okay, so I have positive 2 on top. And then what's 2 times 1? That's just 2. Okay, so what is 2 divided by 2? We can reduce this. 2 over 2 is just 1. Okay, so we have the x part of our vertex. Okay, which we just found to be 1. Okay, but we're still missing the y part. So this part might be the little tricky part. So now we are going to use our x and plug it in everywhere we see an x in our function to find y. You see how it says y equals this rest part? Well, everywhere we see an x, we're going to plug in that 1 because that's what we found x to equal. Okay, so I'm going to write out the whole equation here. So we know that y now equals x squared, but instead of an x, I'm going to put a space, minus 2 times x plus 4. Okay, now everywhere I have that space, I'm going to plug in my -1. Or excuse me, positive 1. Okay, so positive 1 for both those spaces. And now we're just going to solve. So what is 1 squared, or 1 times 1? Just going to give me a 1. Okay, what is -2 times 1? -2 times 1. -2, or -2. And plus 4 on the end. Okay, now if you want to do this in your head, you're more than welcome to. If you want to do this on a calculator, you're more than welcome to. Okay, so we can do 1 minus 2 plus 4 is going to give us our y, and that is going to be 3, which we now know is the y part of our vertex. Okay, so the x part of our vertex was right there. The y part of our vertex was right there. Okay, so we found our vertex. So now let's go ahead and put this vertex, graph it on our coordinate plane. So we're going to find 1 on our x-axis right here, and then go up to 3. Okay. Well, here's the thing with quadratics. They make a U shape. Okay, but I'm going to teach you this little trick when our a is 1. Okay, when our a is 1, that means we can just go up 1, over 1 on both sides. So it's a mirror, it's a U. And then from that second point right here, we're going to go up 3 and over 1. 1, 2, 3 over 1. Okay, and there is our U shape with our vertex at the very bottom of our graph. Okay, when it's at the very bottom, just so you know, because you'll need to know it on your assignment, it is called a minimum because it's at the very bottom. Okay, awesome. Let's try that again. So let's go to number 3. Okay, so I'm just going to zoom in just a little bit, just in case that helps. Okay, so let's identify for number 3, A, B, and C. Okay, so my A is 1, my B is -2, my C is 2. If you would like to write that down, you can. Just to save some space, I'm not going to write it down. Okay, so our first step is to find x. X equals -b over 2 times a. Okay, and we're going to fill in these spaces with what we know. -b on top. So what is my b? My b is -2 again. And what's my a? That's going to give me a 1. Okay, so again, just like in number 2, double negative turns to a positive, so that's just +2. 2 times 1 is 2, and 2 divided by 2 is 1. Okay, so we just found the x part of our vertex. Okay, we need to find the x and y, but we found the x. We know that the x part of my vertex is 1. Okay, well, if we know x, we can use that to find y. So now I'm going to do y equals, you're going to copy out this function, this whole side right here, but instead of x's, I'm going to put spaces. X squared minus 2x plus 2. Okay, because we know what x is. We can plug in everywhere we see that x space, we can plug in 1. 1 and 1. Okay, so now we can solve it. What's 1 squared? 1 times 1 is 1. -2 times 1 is -2. And just put the +2 on the end. If you'd like, you can put this in your calculator. Okay, so I got 1 minus 2 plus 2. And that's going to give me positive 1, which is the y part of my vertex. Okay, so we found our vertex. So now we can use that to graph it. So let's put our vertex on our graph. So 1 on our x-axis and go up to 1 on our y-axis. Okay, so now remember our trick. Up 1, over 1 on both sides. And then from that point, up 3. 1, 2, 3, and over 1. 1, 2, 3, and over 1. And connect those points with a U shape. And we know this vertex is a minimum because it's at the very bottom. Okay, beautiful. So only 2 more examples. Okay, so let's look at number 4. Okay, so let's label it A, B, and C. Okay, so we know our first step is to find x. So we know x equals negative b over 2 times a. That was the formula. Okay, but instead of b's and a's, I'm going to put spaces because we know our b and a's, right? So on top is my b. So what's my b? Negative 8. And on bottom is my a, which again is 1. Okay, so what happens with this double negative? Becomes a positive. 2 times 1 is 2. And what is 8 divided by 2? It's going to give me 4. Okay, so in our vertex, we know that the x part of our vertex is 4. Okay, now we can use that x part to find our y. So now we're going to write out y equals, okay, and this whole side followed after that y. But instead of x's, let's put spaces. So x squared minus 8 times x plus 18. Okay, so now everywhere we see that space, we can plug in a 4 because that's what we know x is. 4 and 4. Okay, so let's go ahead and solve it. What is 4 squared? 4 times 4. That's 16. What's negative 8 times 4? Double check this just to make sure. Whoops. Times 4, negative 32. So minus 32 and plus 18. Okay, now we can put this part in our calculator. 16 minus 32 plus 18, that's going to give me positive 2. Okay, so we know that the y part of my vertex is positive 2. Okay, so now that we found our vertex, we can go ahead and graph it. Okay, so find 4 on your x-axis first and go up to 2. And that is our vertex. Okay, now easy peasy, we can use our trick, up 1 over 1 on both sides, and up 3 over 1 on both sides. And there we go. Okay, since this vertex is at the very bottom, we know it's a minimum. Beautiful. One more example. Okay, let's identify A, B, and C. Okay, so our first step is to find x. So we have x equals negative b over 2 times a, but I didn't put the a and the b because we can plug it in. Okay, so on top is my b. So what do I need to plug in for my b? Negative 4 over 2 times a. My a is 1. Okay, so what happens with this double negative? It turns into a positive. So positive 4, 2 times 1 is 2. What is 4 divided by 2? That's just going to be 2. Okay, so in our vertex, we know that the x part of my vertex is 2. Whoops, I wanted to write it in green, keep it consistent. Okay, so let's go ahead and solve for the y part of my vertex using the x that we just found. Okay, so now we're going to write y equals, followed by our equation, x squared minus 4 times x plus 7. Okay, I leave spaces because we know what x is. Okay, we know that x is 2. So in those spaces, we can plug in 2. Okay, so now we can solve. What is 2 squared? 2 times 2? 4. What's negative 4 times 2? Negative 8 or minus 8 and plus 7 on the end. What are we going to get here? We can put in our calculator. So I can do 4 minus 8 plus 7. That's going to give me positive 3. Are we sure? 4 minus 8 plus 7. Yep, just in my head. Positive 3. So we know that the y part of my vertex is positive 3. Okay, so let's go ahead and put it on our graph. So find 2 on your x-axis first. So it's right down here. And go up to 3. Okay, now we're going to use our trick. Up 1 over 1 on both sides. And up 3 over 1 on both sides. Connect it with your U shape. And we know that since this is at the very bottom, it's a minimum. Okay, and that is it for our notes for today. You guys have an assignment that goes with it.